Hi, everybody. This is Beth from Wellness 360 coming to you with our talk today about stress and bone health. So I talk about stress a lot. I run the mindful living class at Wellness 360. I do a lot of stress management tips. So I also teach the osteoporosis class, the exercise class, and during my research and all my studies with osteoporosis, I find that there's a lot of correlation between your mental health and your bone health. So let's start with the choices we make every day have a huge impact on our bone health. So the diet, we talked last week about our diet, our sleeping patterns, which make a big difference, and our exercise. So we talked a little bit about exercise and how important it is for bone health to put that stress on the joints. But one thing we don't talk a lot about is your mental health with bone loss. So back in Eastern theory, which I do use a lot, so back in Eastern theory over 5,000 years ago, bone health was considered something that flows from a state of internal balance of the mind, the body, and the emotional center. So back in Eastern theory, it's really important to have all elements of your internal focus in balance. So your mind is free of stress, your body, you're eating well, you're living in a peaceful environment, and your emotions are all together. So we're going to talk a little bit about how emotions can affect your bone health. So there's a strong emotional connection between stress and your perception of what you're going through in life and how your bones react to that. So let's start by talking a little bit about stress and what stress is. So stress is used a lot in today's time. Stress can be anything from hitting a red light, from waiting too long in the grocery store. Stress can be the loss of a loved one. It doesn't have to be big or small, but stress can be really, really good for our system. So we want to talk a little bit about mental stress and physical stress. So in osteoporosis and with bone health, physical stress is really important. We want to stress those bones. We want to exercise. We want to put force against those bones. But the mental component of stress can be really wearing on the bones. Chronic stress is having those little tiny stressors all the time, day to day. So chronic stress is more about not having that mental relaxation through the day. So our body is meant to have some stress in life. If we didn't have stress, we wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. We wouldn't be able to accomplish tasks and goals. So stress can be good. Unfortunately, in today's society, stress is chronic. It happens all the time. We're stressed about deadlines at work. We're stressed about our family, our finances, our health. There's deadlines to meet. So when you are in a state of chronic stress, it can lead to high blood pressure. It leads to bone loss. It damages your muscle tissue. It actually suppresses the immune system, and it inhibits growth. A lot of chronic stress actually causes issues with our stomach and the intestinal lining. A lot of IBS symptoms are created through stress. So we're going to talk a little bit about the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is this wonderful ebb and flow we have in our body. We have what's called the sympathetic nervous phase and the parasympathetic nervous phase. So the parasympathetic nervous phase is kind of like a brake system. So we get this strike of the sympathetic nervous system to get out of our beds, and then the parasympathetic nervous system comes in and brings ourselves back to an even keel. So it's this beautiful ebb and flow that happens throughout life. The parasympathetic nervous phase is really a lot to do with the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is 75 to 80% of afferent nerves. So there's afferent and efferent nerves. So afferent nerves go from the organs and the body to the brain, and efferent nerves go from the brain to the body. So the vagus system actually has more nerve fibers that send information from our body to our brain than the brain to the body, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. It gets really interesting. So the vagus nerve controls the larynx, or your voice box. It controls your diaphragm, your lungs, your motor functions of your heart. It has some sensory functions, which it deals with your nose and your ears, your tongue, some body organs. I know it connects to your liver. So this vagus nerve is one of the cranial nerves. I believe it's the 10th nerve. Really makes a huge impact on our system. So the parasympathetic nervous phase, when you're in a state of chronic stress, kind of doesn't work. It inhibits, it stops with the motor neurons, and we end up with disease in our body. We end up having high blood pressure. We end up having a lot of digestion problems. We end up with osteoporosis. So it's kind of like a brake system to our heart rate and blood pressure and our deeper breathing. We're going to talk a little bit about shallow breathing versus deeper breathing a little bit later. So whenever your sympathetic nervous phase hits, it's like hitting the gas pedal. It's like hitting the gas pedal so that you can get out of bed, so that you can accomplish a task. So all day long, you have the sympathetic nervous phase. The problem with today is we don't get out of the sympathetic nervous phase. We're on that gas pedal all day long, which can cause a lot of exhaustion, adrenal fatigue, rapid heart rate, increased breath rate, gastrointestinal problems, bronchial dilation, a lot of asthma attacks, and lung issues. So let's talk a little bit about living in that sympathetic nervous phase all day. So you wake up in the morning and you're stressed because you weren't prepared. You're running late for work. You spill your shake on your shirt. You get in the car, you hit every red light, then you get to work and you have your coworkers and deadlines. So we constantly live in this state of chronic stress. So when you're in this chronic stress, there is a large amount of cortisol that's released in your body. Now, cortisol kind of gets a bad rap. Cortisol actually is really good. It's a really important phase in raising our blood sugar. It's really important for suppressing the immune system during like acute situations. It's really important for protein, carbohydrate, and fat digestion. So cortisol can be a really good thing to have. The problem with cortisol is when it's chronically being released in your body. So you really need the right amount of cortisol at the right times for it to be effective and used properly. So acute stress eventually can become chronic stress. So when it does become chronic stress, it elevates your sugar levels. You end up with diabetes. Yes, chronic stress can spike your sugar and has a big impact on your sugar levels in your body. It stores that lovely belly fat that we all hear about with high cortisol, a lot of that abdominal fat. It increases your intestinal impermeability. We talked a little bit about this in the last video. Is more toxins are being released through your system because the barrier in your intestines there's holes in it. So things are getting released into your bloodstream, causing chronic and systematic inflammation. It can increase leaky gut. It increases your blood pressure, and there's just a whole bunch of things. But we're going to get more specific to what it does with your bones. So long-term cortisol release actually can create a lot of havoc with your bone system. Let's talk a little bit about sleep first. So it does affect your sleep quality. So sleep apnea alone can cause it can actually deprive the oxygen in the body, leading to weakened bones. There's been a lot of studies that show not getting the appropriate amount of sleep or having sleep issues, like sleep apnea, will actually weaken your bones. So long-term chronic stress can lead to sleeping issues, which then in turn can weaken your bones and lead to osteoporosis. There was a study done at the Medical College of Wisconsin that they did a lack of sleep with rats, a rat study, and it resulted in the bones not formulating anymore. So new bones stopped forming in these rats, but the bone reabsorption continued, which means without having a lot of sleep, you get the bone reabsorption. So the osteoclasts are working out, cleaning out the bone, but you're not producing new bone. So that leads to brittle bones and potential fractures. A Chinese study showed that reduced sleep is associated with low bone density in middle and middle-aged women. Sorry about that. So Chinese study, they did a study on a bunch of women, and they found that the women that didn't sleep on a regular schedule had decreased bone formation. Insomnia was associated with 52% increased risk of osteoporosis in a Norwegian study. So there's studies after studies after studies that show that sleep is so important for bone formation. Without the appropriate amounts of sleep, you can actually lead to weak bones and increased stress level, which then in turn weakens your bones. Another thing that can help, or I should say hurt with your sleep, is caffeine. So if you drink a lot of stimulants, a lot of caffeine actually causes sleep insomnia and sleep problems, but caffeine also pulls calcium out through your urine. So when you pee, you're losing more calcium. It also, there's a link to caffeine interfering with vitamin D absorption. So having caffeine a lot in your system can cause calcium to be excreted through your urine and vitamin D to not be absorbed properly. And as we talked about last week, you need both vitamin D and calcium together as a unit to build your bones. So if you're going to drink caffeine, just drink it moderately. There's no need to stop all of your caffeine, but definitely keep it in your mind that a lot of caffeine can cause bone loss. So we have hormonal imbalances that chronic stress causes. So it reduces your progesterone. So progesterone binds the osteoblasts, which are the builder cells of the bone. So progesterone actually binds those osteos, it stimulates bone formation. So it protects osteoblasts from damaging effects of cortisol. So the progesterone is really important with bone production because it's protecting the bones from cortisol, which we're going to discuss a little more in depth here in a minute. But it also stimulates bone formation. So when you have a lot of chronic stress, your progesterone is reduced in production. So the less stress you have, the more progesterone you will produce, which is better and healthier for your bones. So now we talk a little bit about the cortisol release. Cortisol, actually chronic release of cortisol, not the one we talked about earlier, actually increases bone absorption. So it blocks osteoblasts from building bone. So while it's inhibiting the osteoblasts from building your bone, the osteoclasts are working overdrive to clean the bone out. So you're not getting more bone production, which can lead to weak bones, brittle bones, and eventually fractures. It blocks calcium from entering your bones. So again, last week we talked about being able to needing the calcium, but you can't absorb if you can't absorb the calcium, it's not working. So you need the vitamin D, you need the calcium, you need the vitamin K, you need all of those vitamins we talked about last week. But if your body can't absorb them because of chronic stress, then you're not utilizing them the way that you should. So it increases, I said before, the more cortisol you have in your bone, it actually increases the release of urine throughout your, or calcium throughout your urine excretion. So you really need to find ways to reduce your stress so that your bones can grow healthy. But how do we do this? Number one, we need to prioritize you as important. We need to prioritize your health. So like we said last week, we want to put your health number one. So making sure you're eating your vegetables, making sure that you're getting your sleep so you don't have the weakened bones and the other stress effects of not sleeping properly. You want to make sure you're getting your relaxation time, make sure you're getting your weight-bearing exercise at least 3 to 5 times a week, if not a little bit every day. Yoga is really great for this. There's a lot of risk involved with yoga. I do have a couple yoga for osteoporosis on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page and on our wellness360fitness.com. You can download a couple yoga videos, about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes long, and it's really good because we take the risk out of the yoga poses, but give you the right things for osteoporosis. So we want to talk a little bit about diaphragmatic breathing. So this is a really good thing that you have control over when it comes to reducing your stress for your bone health. So diaphragmatic breathing actually works on the parasympathetic nervous phase. So when you use diaphragmatic breathing in your day-to-day practice on purpose, you can actually create peace in your life. So the diaphragmatic breathing actually stimulates the vagus nerve. So when you stimulate the vagus nerve, you end up with it promoting relaxation. It lowers your heart rate. It lowers your blood pressure. Remember all those wonderful things that vagus nerve that controls, that we talked about in the beginning of this podcast. It controls the slower heart rate. It controls the deeper breathing. It controls the peace of mind and the calming peace. So you have complete control over how you're feeling in the day by just stopping and doing some deep breathing techniques. So most of us are shallow breathers. So when we breathe shallow, remember those afferent nerve fibers. So the vagus nerve has more fibers that run from our lungs and our heart to our brain that communicate to the brain than vice versa. So when you take it upon yourself to stop and do diaphragmatic breathing, you can actually control your stress levels by just stopping and doing some deep breathing. But there is a very specific way to do diaphragmatic breathing. I'm going to teach you how to do that. So if you put one of your hands on your chest and one on your stomach, and you take a deep breath in through your nose, your stomach, the bottom hand should be expanding. So we use those intercostal muscles between your rib cage. As your rib cage expands, the diaphragm presses down and your abdomen gets bigger. So make sure that you're doing this in a comfortable place, whether you're lying down or sitting up in a chair. Make sure you have really good posture when you're trying this. Because you want to concentrate on filling your belly with air. So as you have your hand on your chest and your hand on your stomach, you take a deep breath in through your nose and you feel your belly expanding. So your belly's getting bigger as you're inhaling. And then as you exhale, you can exhale through the mouth. You can use through pursed lips, or you can just exhale almost like you're exhaling into a balloon. So when you exhale, your hand and your stomach is going in. So your belly button is pulling towards your stomach. So just do that a couple times. Inhale through the nose. The hand on the chest should be nice and still. And the hand on the belly should get bigger. And then now exhale slowly, letting all the air out of your belly. And it should feel like a balloon is deflating. It should feel like you're going really, really slow. And you can do this anytime that you want to. Now, don't be frustrated if it doesn't seem to be working for you. A diaphragmatic breathing can really take a lot of practice, but it's really important for workouts. It's important for yoga. It's a really great way to stimulate that parasympathetic nerve, the vagus nerve. So this type of breathing is so good for your health in every way you could possibly imagine. So again, if you were a smoker, a lot of smokers are chest breathers, so this might be difficult for you, but it's a really great type of practice to help decrease that stress and help improve your bone health. Another thing I want to talk about today is meditation. So I want to talk a little bit about meditation because a lot of people are misguided when it comes to meditation and what meditation is. Meditation is very science-based. A lot of people feel like meditation has to be part of a religion. It is not, although you can incorporate it as part of your religion or your belief system. Meditation is more about bringing your awareness to the present moment on purpose. So what does that mean? That means knowing your triggers when you're under stress, knowing what happens. Maybe you're shallow breathing. Maybe your heart is beating faster. Maybe you're more prone to crave sugar or carbohydrates. But knowing your triggers, whatever that is to you. So throughout the day, just being aware, tuning into your own body, being aware of where you're at, and taking it upon yourself to, on purpose, bring yourself to diaphragmatic breathing. So it's defined as bringing yourself to the present moment on purpose. So knowing when you're in that stress state, maybe you get out of bed and you're feeling flustered, and you become aware of your triggers. So when you become aware of your triggers, taking that time to sit for just a few moments of diaphragmatic breathing. It is proven through studies to reduce anxiety and depression, to enhance your self-awareness, which is really big when you're trying to make any kind of lifestyle changes. When you're trying to live better and healthier for your bone health, it is really important to become aware of your body. Be aware of what you're putting into your mouth. Be aware of your stress level and where you're at in this moment. Be aware of the exercises that you're doing. I just did a video last night on day-to-day things and appropriate body mechanics. Be aware when you're taking things out of the dryer that you're putting your spine at a real risk for fracture if you've been diagnosed with osteoporosis. So awareness for fall prevention, you have to be aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of what your feet are doing. You have to be aware of, the room and what you're going to trip over, or, lifting your feet. A lot of times, a lot of falls happen because we're just tired and we push ourselves too hard and we end up tripping because we're not lifting our feet high enough. So meditation's been proving to reduce age-related memory loss. It builds the gray matter in your brain. So you have all these wonderful places in your brain that help with memory and help with cognition and help with functions. And meditation has proven to increase that gray matter. Also, lack of meditation or living in that fight or flight, that sympathetic nervous phase all the time, has been proven to increase the amygdala, which is your fear center of your brain. So you're going to be more apt to fear. Fear produces stress, chronic stress. So the more you meditate, the smaller that fear center becomes. And that's all you have to do is take 5 minutes a day and sit and do your diaphragmatic breathing. It improves your sleep. We've discussed how important sleep is for people with osteoporosis. So just meditation alone can help decrease your bone loss through sleeping properly. So, and it helps decrease insomnia. It helps control pain. So all of my chronic pain sufferers out there, chronic inflammation, it helps decrease chronic inflammation. It helps you to control your pain levels. There's studies that show that meditators actually, meditators like you and I, the ones that are doing it maybe 10 to 20 minutes a day, can reduce their chronic pain by 51% by practicing meditation. There's another study that shows people that meditate hours and hours a day. We're talking about like Buddhist monks and people like that can reduce their chronic pain by up to 90%. Those are huge statistics. So, and it also decreases your blood pressure, it reduces asthma attacks, and it does improve your bone health. So, just to wrap everything up, we talked a little bit last week about just keeping your bones healthy. Today, I felt it to be really important to show you that chronic stress not only affects the rest of our body and wreaks havoc in the rest of our body, it can wreak havoc on our bones. Remember, it decreases our, chronic stress can decrease our intestinal impermeability. So what happens is we end up with leaky gut. We end up with IBS. So we're not digesting our nutrients properly, which is really, really important for your bone health, getting your vitamins, getting your minerals that are needed for bone health. Chronic cortisol release decreases your progesterone. Chronic cortisol release can have a huge impact on calcium being lost through your urine. So there's a lot of reasons affecting bone health to do your diaphragmatic breathing, take a moment to meditate, and bring yourself on purpose to the present moment anytime you can throughout your day-to-day life. For me, that just means a couple times a day, I might just notice that I'm shallow breathing, bring myself to the present moment with a couple nice deep diaphragmatic breaths, and then go about your day. Remember, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous phase is supposed to work as a really nice ebb and flow. You're supposed to have both to get through life, to get through your exercise program. You don't want to be in the parasympathetic nervous phase when you're lifting weights to build bone strength. But you do want to be in the parasympathetic nervous phase afterwards. So you want to make sure you have that nice ebb and flow that's happening where the sympathetic nervous phase kicks in and then the parasympathetic phase kicks in. So take a few moments for yourself, take care of your bones, take a few deep diaphragmatic breaths, and keep those bones healthy. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll take any questions or comments afterwards. If you want to leave them underneath, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And until next week, we will see you. Have a great day.